with some brief indications where the laser surgery can be applied. And the part 2 of the webinar will be focusing on the evaluation, management, certain evidence, and some surgical videos on that. So just a bit of Bhargav, yeah.
Sir.
Okay, nothing. So just a bit of background before I go further. So if you look at the larynx cancers, how it was managed until the 1990s, so majority of the laryngeal cancers would end up with a laryngectomy, meaning majority of them would have permanent stoma, and this permanent stoma had led to a significant psychosocial impact with reduction on the quality of life. As a result of which, researchers or clinicians across the world looked at various other options, and with advances in radiation technology, chemotherapy, drugs, the two landmark trials, the VA and RTOG 9111, they really showed that these patients, when the laryngeal cancers didn't come out of the laryngeal framework, these patients can be treated with non-surgical organ preservation options in the form of chemoradiation. As a result, the role of surgery in the form of laryngectomy took a backseat, and majority of the patients were treated with organ preservation in the form of chemoradiation, with surgery in larynx being restricted for select sites when the larynx tumor came out of the thyroid cartilage, that is extralaryngeal spread, or when the patient had a bulky disease and patient end up with a dysfunctional larynx in the form of a tracheostomy. However, during this led to a new kind of a treatment approach, that is organ preservation, non-surgical option in the form of chemoradiation. So surgeons, we took a backseat. However, during the same time, there have been significant advances in the technology, that is incorporation of laser technology and robotic surgery technology, robotics into surgery. So by this minimally invasive surgery, what really happened is we didn't have to cut through external incisions, cut through the mandible, go through normal tissues to reach the tumor. So with the use of these technology, we could perform surgeries through the mouth without needing any external incision, thereby oncologically being still sound, reducing the functional morbidity or recovery of these patients, and this translated to shorter treatment stay as well as cost effectiveness. So this led to a new terminology in surgical as well, that is organ preserving surgical option incorporating laser and robotic surgery. So in this presentation, I shall be talking about lasers. So what basically laser stands for? The laser is nothing but light amplification by stimulated emission of radiation, and the credit for this invention goes to Einstein. The characteristics of this laser is that it is of a single wavelength. It is very intense parallel beams. As a result, we are able to produce a fine pinpoint beam which acts as a cutting tool, just like a surgical knife or an electrocautery, but with a better precision of better precise cutting tool. So when it comes to laser in early glottic cancers or vocal cord lesions, the most commonly discussed lasers are the carbon dioxide laser as well as the KTP lasers. So what are the characteristics of these two lasers? So the KTP lasers has a wavelength of around 500, and it has selectively get absorbed in the hemoglobin, that is the hemoglobin. And as a result, the KTP laser has a better coagulation property, whereas in terms of preciseness, KTP is inferior to the carbon dioxide. But the carbon dioxide, because it gets absorbed in water and there is minimal scattering, reflection of transmission of this beam, it is a very precise cutting tool with a tissue penetration of just less than 0.1 millimeter. As a result, the carbon dioxide laser is a preferred laser for vocal cord surgeries compared to KTP. But the drawback of the carbon dioxide laser is it has a low coagulation property. It can only coagulate tiny vessels less than 0.5 mm diameter. So coagulation is one of the problem. But luckily, when we're dealing with vocal cord cancer, vocal cord lesions, it are usually relatively avascular. We don't come across bleeding unless we are working in the anterior commissure area, where we rely on cautery for coagulation, if at all any bleeding occurs. So there are two major companies manufacturing lasers. So the Luminous and the KLS Martin group. So I had an experience of using both the laser machines in different centers, and both have very similar capabilities in terms of the functions available. So what are the advantages of these carbon dioxide laser machine? Carbon dioxide laser.
Sir, Akshay sir, we
Yeah.
are not able to see the PPT if at all you are presenting, sir. So if you are presenting, kindly share your screen, sir.
Oh, is it?
Yes,
sorry.
Yeah. There is a share screen option in the below with the green button. Just when you press it, you'll get it. Yeah.
Can you see it now?
Yes, sir. We can see it, sir. We can see it now. Thank you.
Okay. So I was just talking about the differences between carbon dioxide and the KTP laser, and you can see on the table, like what I had discussed, that the carbon dioxide laser is a very precise cutting tool because it gets absorbed in water. There is minimal scatter, reflection of transmission of the beam. As a result, it is very, very precise. However, it has a very low coagulation property compared to the KTP laser. As a result, whenever using KTP laser, if we come across any bleeding, we have to rely on cautery to control the hemostasis. But in vocal cord surgeries, we rarely come across bleeding unless we work on the anterior commissure region. So as discussed, there are two major companies, the Luminous and the KLS Martin, and both have equal capabilities. And what are the capabilities of these machines? So these are versatile machines, and they are very precise cutting tools. They are very safe and easy to use. By versatile, I mean that you can use the laser as a free beam coupled to the micromanipulator. You can use with the handpiece attachment to carry out surgeries on the oral cavity or oropharynx, or with the fiber, you can carry out procedures on the subglottis, trachea, and those unaccessible sites. So this is a small video showing the versatility of the laser machine. So this is a Luminous Equipulse duo laser machine, which we have at our center. So it has this is the arm, as well as it has a port for the fiber attachment. In the arm, in the laser arm, you can either attach the hand attachment to carry out surgeries on the vocal cord or the oral cavity or the oropharynx, and it has a small little adjustment through which you can either focus or defocus the beam. The focus beam is usually used for cutting, and defocus beam for coagulation properties. So the fiber which get attached to the fiber port, it is about 2 meters in length, and through various guiding instruments, this fiber can be reached wherever the area of interest. This fiber can also be channeled through the bronchoscopes to carry out procedure in the trachea and the subglottis. So it's very precise, as I just mentioned. With the help of the micromanipulator attached to the microscope, we'll be able to precisely focus the laser beam on the vocal cord. The vocal cord, as you know, is a very delicate structure. We should not be unnecessarily removing normal tissues because it's functionally important as well. At the same time, in vocal cord, at the same time, we only aim for 2 millimeter circumferential margin. And since it is a very precise and a very fine beam, there is no very minimal charring, and it serves as a very excellent tool for the surgery. With the help of the handpiece, again, we can have a very nice cutting tool. So we can carry out surgeries in the excision of the precancerous lesion of the oral cavity. This case in point is a leukoplakia of the tongue, for which we had done a laser excision. So in certain unaccessible site, as we just discussed, with the help of the fiber channeled through the bronchoscope, we can reach the subglottic or the trachea. And this gentleman was a patient with the subglottic stenosis. It was a small segment subglottic stenosis. All conservative managements were failed. we did cruciate incision and balloon dilatation with a single setting. With the help of, without the fiber, we were not able to, we couldn't have achieved this outcome in this patient. So with a single sitting of a fiber assisted cutting of the stricture and dilatation, the patient was symptom free. It is very safe. So in the laser machine, there is an active port indicator with the glowing of the yellow light. The whole team knows that the laser is active, and the required precautions can be taken. So it also has a screen in which, if at all you have a bleeding during the procedure and you want to switch on to the cautery, you can press just with the touch screen. You can shift the laser machine to the standby mode, so that the chances of inadvertent pressing of the laser beam can be avoided. So it is very easy to use as well. There is an electronic touchscreen display through which you can switch between various settings. So you can use it for majority of the sites in head and neck. So in the head and neck ENT region. So for larynx, what we use is an AccuSpot 400, and you can change the settings. So my preference for vocal cord surgery is a super pulse continuous mode. I like to work on the lowest power watt. Again, the wattage can be just changed with the press of a button. You can change the shape as well as the size, and all of them is very, very easy to use. There is no need of any extensive training required. So as I told, my preference for performing laser surgeries is a 4 watt power. I usually use a line or a round spot size with the smallest size possible, and super pulse continuous mode. To run a successful endoscopic laser service, it's a team approach. First of all, you need to have the support of the management, to have the infrastructure to really start on the program. You need to have trained surgeon to perform, and a very excellent or a very competent anesthesia team is vital. So you need to also have a dedicated pathology team to analyze these tiny specimens, and to properly execute this procedure, you need to have a good biomedical as well as nursing team. To achieve best functional outcomes, you need to have an excellent rehabilitation team as well. We shall come about each of these specialty one by one. So in terms of setup at our center, we have the AccuPulse Luminous DO system, the Leica microscope, as well as the other agents such as the smoke evacuator. The microlaryngeal instruments required are pretty standard. In addition, what is required is a different range of laryngoscopes, because exposure is very key in vocal cord surgery. So you need to have a range of laryngoscopes and suction cautery. If at all, if you come across some bleeding, suction cautery comes very handy. Training is very important, as discussed in this study. So whenever there is any new treatment modality, the outcomes dip significantly. Hence, before embarking on any new surgical procedure, it's very important to get the proper training. At our center, we have a division of minimally invasive head neck surgery, focusing on lasers and robotics, and where our fellows get adequate exposure to work on these, to be competent to perform the surgery once they are back into their practice. So we also run an annual training program in association with the Academy of Head Neck Oncology of Karnataka, and this happens in the second week of November. Again, close collaboration with the anesthesia is key. So how do they anesthetize our patients? Is they either use an endotracheal tube in the form of standard endotracheal tube, microlaryngeal tubes, and laser tubes are the options. And certain situations when the tumors are bulky, they resort to either a jet ventilation, a thrive-assisted ventilation, and sometimes intermittent apnea by spontaneous ventilation. So these are the range of endotracheal tubes which have been tried over the last few decades. Initially, they were using rubber tubes, slowly graduated to using laser tubes. However, our preference is to use smallest number microlaryngeal tubes. So we usually used to prefer number 5 microlaryngeal tubes. So anesthesia is quite a challenge because this surgery involves sharing of the airway between the surgeons as well as the anesthetists, and there is a trade-off between safe airway ventilation versus adequate surgical access. The choice of the technique is dependent upon the anesthesia team, the experience of the anesthesia team, the equipment available, and certain situations they become a little bit creative. Like our team headed by Dr. Rajesh, what he does is when we have a bulky lesion, he does the percutaneous tracheostomy on the table, and that gets extubated. Those patients get extubated at the end of the procedure. And generally, all our transoral laser surgeries are performed as daycare procedure. But however, in certain patients where percutaneous tracheostomies are indicated, we keep these patients in the hospital for a day because the patient to just get accustomed to it, some rare chances of having a subcutaneous emphysema. So if at all the patients develop a small subcutaneous emphysema, so we counsel the patient accordingly so that don't get panicked. So the extent or the type of the extent of the lesion also contributes a great deal in the type of anesthesia. As I just mentioned, if there are very bulky lesion, our anesthetist would prefer to do a percutaneous tracheostomy and extubate them on the same day. So this is a small video demonstrating a technique. As I told, we use a microlaryngeal tube. 5 is what we prefer, and we inflate the bulb of the endotracheal tube using a saline, which is mixed with methylene blue. So it serves as an indicator. If at all we accidentally hit the bulb of the endotracheal tube, the neuropathy which is placed below the vocal cord gets stained. So that's how we get to know. However, this doesn't happen usually, but just for safety precautions, we use a methylene blue to inflate the bulb. So there are certain laser safety precautions we take. We need to restrict the number of the staff in the operating theater. So we inflate the bulb with the methylene blue. We take care that the eyes of the patient as well as the face is covered with wet neuropathies. We use neuropathy, which is moist neuropathy is placed below the vocal cord. The instruments are pretty standard. What in additionally we use is insulated suction cautery is what we use during the procedure. So laser fire is a theoretical chance, but as I said, it doesn't usually happen. Generally, for a laser fire to happen, you need to have 3 things. So one is the fire, number 2 is the combustible material, number 3 is oxygen. However, when we are performing laser surgeries on the vocal cord, we do have the fire in the form of laser, but the oxygen is very minimal. Our anesthetist keeps the oxygen concentration at 30%. And combustible material is not there because we usually place a wet neuropathy below the vocal cord. So laser fire is a theoretical possibility, but if you stick on to the basics, it doesn't happen. So the pathological analysis is crucial. During laser surgery, what we get is very tiny specimens. So these specimens have to be oriented properly to get the optimal result. So hence, the communication between the surgeons and the pathologist is key. So we take the specimen to the pathologist when the patient is still under anesthesia. They mark it appropriately. Once the specimen is marked, it is kept on the cryostat for about 2 to 3 minutes, frozen, and later the tissues are sectioned and appropriately processed. So they put a lot of hard work to really give us the information about the extent of the resection, type of tissues, and these are all very important for us to achieve the best outcomes. So once the sectioning of the tissue is done for margins, they appropriately stain it with the hematoxylin eosin staining and then do a microscope. So as we all know, in vocal cord surgery, what margin we required is just 1 to 2 millimeter circumferential as well as the deep margin. So if at all one of the margins come close or positive, we go back and re-resect that margin. But generally, it is the depth of the resection is usually a area of contention, and 2 millimeter circumferential margin is what we want to achieve. Rehabilitation plays a major role. All our patients goes through baseline preoperative assessment of speech in terms of perceptual voice, acoustic voice, as well as patient-reported voice in the form of voice handicap index. And all of these patients get post-operatively followed up at 2 weeks, 3 months, 6 months, and 1 year. They get actively rehabilitated by a speech therapist. Prasanna leads our speech therapy team, and until they attain their new normal voice. Majority of the patients, if the resection doesn't involve removal of the vocalis muscle, that is when you do a type 3 chordectomy, their voice outcomes are quite similar to normal. However, when the resection involves removal of the vocalis muscle, then the voice outcomes becomes poor. Even though the voice outcomes are immediate voice outcomes are bad, when you look at the voice outcomes at 6 months and 1 year, it is very, very normal. So in general, lasers can in addition to the glottic lesions, it can also be used in a very nice, very efficient manner in oral cavity lesions, especially the precancerous lesions such as the leukoplakia, erythroplakia, and certain select superficial early cancers, as well as benign lesions. So my experience is mainly on the glottic lesions, both precancerous, cancerous lesions. I have experience of treating about 2 cases of T3 lesions, but they were all pedunculated lesions. As a beginner, it's important to start on very T1 lesions, and once you get the learning curve, then you can gradually go ahead in embarking on larger lesions. So we have done few cases of laryngeal papillomatosis. For a patient with bilateral vocal cord palsy with stridor, laser posterior cordotomy really helps, and select cases of Rinke's edema. So people with experience have tried laser surgeries in oropharynx as well as supraglottic lesions, but I don't have any experience in treating these kind of lesions. So early glottic cancers are a unique type of cancers. Usually, these patients present early because any lesion in the vocal cord patient will present with voice change. They get picked up early, and these biologically are slow-going tumors. They have less lymph nodal metastasis as well as less lymph nodal as well as distant metastatic spread. So we have excellent outcomes irrespective of the treatment. The treatment options available are external beam radiotherapy, which is the current standard across India, but there are surgical options as well. The conservative surgery, cold steel surgery. But with the better understanding of transoral laser surgery, by far transoral laser surgery is a standard surgical option for an early glottic cancers. So there have been numerous studies. What are the advantages of endoscopic lasers? So there have been numerous studies which have shown that if you select your cases properly, in addition to the equal oncological outcomes, you also can attain equal functional outcomes when you're treating early glottic cancers compared to radiotherapy. In addition, the transoral laser surgery is very site specific. We are we are using the laser machine under magnification under the microscope, so we can remove the lesion with millimeter precision. However, in radiotherapy, despite whatever advances in technology, still you will be treating both the vocal cord a centimeter above and centimeter below. So majority of the vocal cord laser surgeries are done as daycare procedures, and post-operatively these can be easily monitored with a simple Hopkins endoscopy every 3 months. And unfortunately, if the tumor comes back, it's very rare, we can go ahead and re-laser these lesions and still preserve the larynx. However, if the patient is treated with radiotherapy, they come back with the recurrence, usually they end up with a total laryngectomy. So since it's a surgical procedure, obviously we get tissue for pathological analysis, we get to know the tumor, and it's very reassuring to the patient to know that the cancer is out of the body. So since it's a minimally invasive procedure, there is very minimal morbidity, excellent functional recovery of these patients, and hence excellent quality of life. So this procedure takes about 30 minutes to 1 hour to perform. There is a shorter hospitalization and treatment time, hence it is cost and time effective. So we can always keep radiotherapy as a standby option if at all patient comes back with a second primary or unfortunately sometimes a recurrence. So this is a standard setup. So we usually like to keep the microscope on the left side. We keep the laser machine on the right side. The suction is the most important. You can use a smoke evacuator, or two suctions are very important. One is to suck the fumes, other is to maintain hemostasis or use it as a traction. So this is a small video demonstrating the setup of a laser. So all our nurses and technicians are well versed in setting up these lasers. Before wheeling the patients, we set the laser machine and check the laser. So this is the micromanipulator being coupled to the adapter in the microscope with the help of a screw. And this micromanipulator gets attached to the arm. So there are certain electrical connection between to be connected between the laser machine as well as the micromanipulator on the microscope. So these are the settings. So we use the larynx. As I told, AccuSpot 400 is what we use. So 400 is the working distance which is required to carry out laryngeal procedures, because so that we have enough space between the microscope and the laryngoscope for our instrumentation. Super pulse and continuous is the setting. So as I told, I usually prefer a line or a round with the smallest size possible, and 4 watt is the power which I use. What is important to is having a focused beam. You can achieve the focused beam by setting the right working distance and focusing the micromanipulator to get the focused beam. So again, our anesthetist using a microlaryngeal tube number 5 with the safety precautions. So we use the wet mops, as we told. We keep the patient with the on the neck extension with the shoulder below the pillow below the shoulder. Laryngeal exposure is very vital for us to carry out the procedure. So we use the laryngoscope. Once we attain a good exposure, we suspend the laryngoscope so that both our hands becomes free. So one of the key determinants to carry out the successful transoral laser surgery is the exposure. So we always subject the patients preoperatively for a check endoscopy. We evaluate the subglottis. We look at the anterior commissure, posterior commissure, ventricle. Basically, we look for the possible second primary. We can also do a bronchoscopy by deflating the cuff with a cystoscope, which is about 40 centimeter in length. So since we are dealing with the, so the arm of the laser machine gets coupled to the micromanipulator. So when you're treating early glottic cancer, we should be able to treat with single modality. So only when you have an adequate exposure, we should embark on transoral laser surgery. So the transoral laser surgery is a line of sight. So we can only fire the laser beam along the straight line. So having the microscope, the laryngoscope, as well as the lesion in a straight line is very important. So elevate the head end of the bed to about 30 to 40 degree until you have the right exposure. So once you have the right exposure, then make sure you are able to see the lesion all around. You're confident to get the lesion completely, then you go ahead and embark on the procedure. At this point, if you feel that you cannot get the lesion out completely, that's when you need to take a biopsy and back out from the laser surgery and refer these patients for radiotherapy. So so early glottic cancers need to be treated with single modality, and we are not justified by doing laser surgery and having a positive margin and subjecting these patients for radiotherapy. Hence, intraoperative assessment is vital to achieve the best outcomes. So usually I start with the anterior part and then work around laterally and come posteriorly. So once the specimen is excised, since these specimens are very tiny, so orientation is important. We fix it on the pictorially represented paraffin block with simple needles, colored needles, and subject it for pathological evaluation. So you can see about about 2 to 3 millimeter of normal mucosa all around. You need to stretch it and orient to the pathologist to appropriately assess these tissues. So when you have a larger tumor, you can do piecemeal resection. So you can do a transtumoral resection, identify the depth of the lesion, take margins, and then serially remove the lesion. So all of the patients after excision are again subjected to a check endoscopy to evaluate as well as photo document the defect. And you can see there is some amount of charring in the bed. This carbonization, if at all it happens, it needs to be cleaned with a wet neural patty, because if there is carbon particles in the bed, this leads to post-operative granulation formation. And all these carbon particles can be simply wiped off using a normal neuropathy. And this is what I'm trying to do at the end of the procedure to achieve the best post-operative results. So what's our experience? So in HCG, we have started transoral laser surgery from 2015. So my experience is about 60 cases, 50 which I have performed at HCG, majority of them for early glottic cancers, and few select for laryngeal papillomatosis, a couple of subglottic stenosis, and a few for bilateral vocal cord palsies. So as ENT surgeon, actually there are a lot of indications for doing transoral laser surgery. If at all you see on a clinic endoscopy, when a patient presents to you with a change in voice, if the lesion is restricted to one vocal cord, not very bulky, like these videos, these are the patients which are ideal for a single setting transoral laser assisted excision biopsies. So it is advisable not to subject these patients for a DL scopy biopsy and then refer for a laser surgery. So all these kind of a lesion, when the lesion is, even if it is pedunculated, not bulky, all of these lesions can be very effectively managed by a single setting transoral laser assisted excision biopsy, which takes about an hour, and patient gets discharged on the same day. It gives pathological information as well as cure. So whenever the lesions are involving, if there is a precancerous lesion involving bilateral vocal cords, in that situation, you can stage this procedure, because when you do a laser excision involving both vocal cord in the single setting, there is a high chance of web formation. So when you have a bilateral vocal cord superficial lesion, we can stage this procedure, do an NBI, see the side where it has a bad pattern, do a laser surgery of that one first, and then do a repeat laser surgery on the opposite side after about 6 weeks. And these have been proven, and these are standard treatments. When the lesion is bulky, when there is a transglottic extension which you appreciate on table during examination under anesthesia, these patients, when you feel that you cannot get them out completely with negative margin, you should not embark on laser surgeries in these patients. Just take a biopsies. If it is proven as squamous cell carcinoma, subject these patients for radiotherapy. So we need to be very, very selective in our selection for oncological cases using laser surgery. So we have certain benign lesions. This was a very excellent case of a supraglottic stenosis, which Professor Palm demonstrated in the last live surgery conference, which we had done. The patient was from Bangladesh. She did very well with the simple cruciate incision, which took about 10 minutes, and it was an excellent outcome with the help of a laser. So certain situations when you have a papillomatosis, we can use both the laser cutting tool as well as defocused beam of the laser to coagulate the superficial lesions. So again, laryngeal papillomatosis is one more site in which we can use. In addition to the laser, you can also use it for oral cavity surgeries. It's very simple. Only thing is maintaining hemostasis is a problem. So we usually rely on bipolar forceps for maintaining the hemostasis. However, the recovery of these patients compared to the using the traditional cautery are excellent with laser. So that's a small video again demonstrating the same. So finally, I would like to acknowledge my teachers, Professor Shanai, Professor Iyer, with whom I have trained and learned the head and neck surgical skills and reconstructive skills. Especially acknowledge Professor Palm, with whom I learned the laser skills, and my current mentor and colleague, Dr. Rao. His guidance, I'm able to practice what I have learned over the last 8 to 9 years. Finally, I thank everyone for the patient hearing. If it's any questions, any comments, happy to take.
So thank you, sir. Thank you for the questions. So there are some questions, sir, in the chat. So I'll read out to you, sir. So my first question was, during subglottic or tracheal resections, do you prefer jet ventilation?
Yeah. So when you perform surgeries on subglottic or the tracheal lesions, it is always preferred. You can only do this procedure with tubeless kind of anesthesia. And jet is always preferred anesthesia technique in this kind of procedure. In certain situation, we go for apneic ventilation. They do the ventilation, give us about 15 minutes to do the procedure, and then they ventilate the patient again. And again, we kind of switch in between and do the procedures. So actually, when you are doing a subglottic stenosis, like a short segment subglottic stenosis, with the help of a laryngoscope suspended, we have the airway under complete control. So what I basically do it, and this is what I learned from Carsten, is that we take serial endotracheal tubes. So in a subglottic stenosis, there'll be usually a pinpoint stenotic segment. So initially we give an assisted, like a non-invasive ventilation, and then we suspend the laryngoscope, use a laser beam, do a cruciate incision, start with a number 4 endotracheal tube. Intermittently, we ourselves introduce the endotracheal tube, give it to the anesthetist to ventilate, take the tube back, and then serially start dilating. So it helps both as a dilator as well as a ventilation tube, and that's why both of them are in full control of the airway.
Okay, sir. So the next question is from Dr. Kinjal Majumdar. Do you always prefer frozen section in the MLS?
So if you look at the literature, there is no much role of frozen section in transoral laser surgery because on the superficial extent, you are doing under magnification. Frozen section has role only for the deep margin. But our practice at HCG is to use frozen, but if you look at literature, it doesn't make much of a difference.
Okay, sir. So the next question is again by Dr. Kinjal Majumdar. He was asking that Mendenhall study shows equal oncological and functional outcomes with carbon dioxide laser and EBRT. So, however, any such evidence is lacking for T3 primary. So, what's your preference on this one, sir?
Sorry, can you come back again, Bhargav?
Yes, sir. Sir, he was asking, the Mendenhall study shows equal oncological and functional outcomes with carbon dioxide laser and EBRT. However, any such evidences is lacking for T3 primaries. So, so what is your preference on this? Or what is your take on this one, sir?
So on T3 primaries with laser?
Yes, sir.
So I think, so as a beginner, I think we need to be very selective in choosing our cases. So T3 larynx is a different ball game altogether. I don't have much experience treating T3 cancers, because T3 cancer you need to address the neck as well. So the management becomes quite complex. However, so T3 radiologically, I mean, I really can't answer your question on T3 with laser, because I don't think currently there is enough evidence to tell that transoral laser surgery can be used, can achieve a similar functional outcomes compared to chemoradiotherapy for treating T3 lesions.
Okay, sir. So the next question is from Dr. Ashish Dora. Sir, could you please tell in what settings you use the laser for laser resection?
Correct. So for a laser surgery of the vocal cord, what setting I use is a continuous super pulse with the lowest power possible, that is number 4 watt in our machine. We use a 4 watt continuous super pulse, and the shape of the beam is a line of 0.3 millimeter size.
Hello. Yes, sir.
Hello. Yeah.
Yes, sir.
So continuous super pulse, 4 watt power with a line setting with a 0.3 millimeter beam size.
Okay, sir. So next question is from Prasanna Hegde. In type 3 to 5 chordotomies, is it wise to leave behind carbon particles, hoping that granulation would produce better functional voice outcomes in post-op setting?
So the way granulation happens is unpredictable. So what as surgeons we can do is to prevent complication. And if at all, I mean, we generally don't come across carbonization if you have focused the beam rightly. But if at all you come across carbonization, it is better to clear the carbon particles to avoid granulation, because the granulation formation is unpredictable.
Okay. Okay, and the next question is from again Dr. Kinjal Madhunja. He's asking about your experience on laser-assisted supraglottic laryngectomies.
So as I just mentioned, I have no much experience in supraglottic laryngectomies, but see, all of the supraglottic lesions go for a robotic surgery in our settings. But as I understand the laser technique better, and I read articles on supraglottic laryngectomies, I feel laser is a very beautiful tool for supraglottic surgeries as well as oropharyngeal surgeries, but you need to maintaining hemostasis is tricky. So when you come across the superior laryngeal pedicle along the pharyngoepiglottic fold, whenever you cut the mucosa and see the pedicle, using a laryngeal clips, you need to clip it. And usually you do it as a piecemeal resection. You cut through the epiglottis and you remove as a piecemeal. But it's all theoretical. I personally don't have any experience managing supraglottic lesion with laser at present.
Okay, sir. Sir, our next question is from Dr. Satakshi Chatterjee. So she's primarily thanking you. And she has 2 questions, sir. The first question is, do you prefer to do an angle Hopkins endoscopy to assess the undersurface of the vocal cord before starting your laser resection? Right. Apart from the Hopkins at the endoscopy in the clinical evaluation.
Correct.
Okay, sir. Continue. I'll ask the second question.
So as I just showed in my video as well, the Hopkins evaluation is very, very important, and it has to be done both with the 0 degree as well as an angle 30-degree telescope. So we usually prefer a cystoscope, which is about 40 centimeter in length, which helps us to evaluate the subglottis, and also by deflating the cuff, we can evaluate the bronchus as well. And an angle telescope is very important to evaluate the subglottic as well as ventricular extent. So all of our patients undergo a Hopkins evaluation before focusing onto the microscope.
Okay, sir. So the second question from her is, what is your preference of imaging and cut thickness in early vocal cord malignancies to aid in deep margin assessment before laser surgery?
So correct. It's a very important question. Whenever you have a vocal cord lesion which is extending to the anterior commissure, CT scan is mandatory, and we go for about 0.3, 0.4 millimeter serial sectioning from the superior notch of the thyroid up till the cricoid because it's a very small space between extralaryngeal, and all bulky lesions which are going to the anterior commissure have high risk of having an extralaryngeal spread. I also would look for a sagittal section, look for a transglottic spread on the vertical plane. So if there is a spread of the lesion in the transglottic extension along the vertical plane on the sagittal scan, that is when you should not plan for a transoral laser surgery. That patient straight away goes for a chemoradiation after a biopsy if there is no extralaryngeal spread.
Thank you, sir. So the next question is from Aruna. In which cases do you prefer false codectomy for ease of surgery?
Yeah, very important question. So as I told, laryngeal exposure is a key determinant to perform transoral laser surgery. So if you have a lesion in the free edge of the vocal cord, because we need a millimeter, about 2 millimeter pathological margin on final specimen. So what we have to do is, if there's a lesion in the free edge of the vocal cord, just going into the ventricle, all of these patients, we would do a vestibulotomy first. Vestibulotomy for exposure, and then we go ahead for the thing. About good number of patients, about 30% of a patient, we do a vestibulotomy before doing the procedure on the vocal cord.
Okay, sir. And next question is from again Dr. Kinjal Majumdar. He was asking if intraoperative NBA assisted surgical margin analysis, how much is it useful?
So intraoperative assessment is very important for the tool, but we don't routinely do it like in our setup. But intraoperative narrowband imaging does help when you have a bilateral lesion. So you have a bilateral lesion in the vocal cord, you want to stage the procedure to decide which one to do in the first sitting. That will help in the narrowband imaging. And if at all in narrowband imaging you find some suspicious superficial little looking lesion on the vocal cord or the glottic or the supraglottic, you can use the defocus beam and you can fulgurize those lesions as well. So narrowband has a role, but I don't have any personal experience of using narrowband imaging intraoperatively for practice at present.
Okay, sir. So the next question is from again Dr. Ashish. Any role of PET scan to assess the residual disease on follow-up? If so, what is the ideal time to do the PET scan after a TOLR?
So generally for an early glottic cancer, if the lesion is not going to the anterior commissure, not going to the ventricle, we wouldn't do an imaging at all. Even on the post-operative follow-up, if at all we see some granulation or a suspicious lesion in the vocal cord on follow-up on endoscopy, we would rather prefer to do a narrowband imaging and do a narrowband imaging directed biopsies rather than the PET scan. So to answer his question, in an early glottic lesion, post-operatively on follow-up, narrowband imaging and directed biopsy is a preferred follow-up tool rather than a PET scan.
Okay, sir. So the next question is from Dr. Ratna Shetty. So do you always go ahead with the transoral laser resection without biopsy confirmation?
Correct. So hi Ratan. So see, for vocal cord lesion, whenever the lesion is on laryngoscopy under anesthesia, we're able to see the lesion all around, and the lesion extent of resection is like a type 2 or a type 3 kind of cordectomies. We straight away go for a laser assisted excision biopsy.
Okay. Sure, sir. So the next question is from Dr. Joshna. She is asking, could you please elaborate on the follow-up protocol and the parameters you assess in the post-operatively, during follow-up?
So our follow-up protocol is, so we subject all our patients of early vocal glottic cancers for frozen section. So we follow these patients on the 7th post-operative day. So we do a check endoscopy. So till the first week is we advise them a strict voice rest, put them on some saline nebulization, some cough suppressants, as well as antacids and multivitamins for a month. So we follow them back on 2 weeks, 3 months, 6 months, 6 months, 9 months, and 12 months. And all of these follow-up results get a consultation from a swallowing team, and they work on their voice exercises, and we get the voice evaluation done post-operatively as well.
Okay, sir. That's it, sir. No more questions as of now. So, sir, we thank you so much, sir, for your excellent presentation. So our next presentation will be again on the coming Monday, sir, by Dr. Akshay again. on 27th. And our immediate next presentation again is on flaps is by Dr. Deepak Balasubramanian sir, which is going to be on this Wednesday on 22nd April. So with this, I would like to take leave of this webinar. So thank you everyone.
Yeah.
Thank you for coming and thank you for participation.
Thanks, Bhargav. Bye.
Thank you, sir. Bye, sir.
It was a nice presentation. Thank you, Akshay sir. Thank you so much.